Good evening, good evening. Hey, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar. We're going to wait a minute as the room is starting to fill. I see the number is ticking up, and happy to have a big group tonight talking about the digital SAT. So give us a few minutes, less than that. It's starting to hit our number here. Okay, Matt, you might be right, my friend.
Try my best.
All right, so everyone, I think we'll start to do our introductions. Jed Applerouth, founder of Applerouth Education. Very happy to be here tonight, and with my main man, Mr. Matt Kiesner.
Hey, everyone.
Matt has been creating our instructional materials for a decade plus. He's a SAT wizard, has taught and learned this material like no one else, probably in a long distance. So we're here. We're going to do a little tag team with talking about what's going on with the digital test, and then field questions. We'll also talk briefly at the end about test optional, how this all fits in terms of what it all means. And we're going to have time at the end for Q&A. We definitely will. So let us jump in. We're going to have a recording of this also, and so expect that early next week. Today is today is Tuesday. Later this week, we're going to have a digital recording sent to you. You can watch it again, play it back, share with friends, all the good things. All right, so let's begin. First, to begin with, some of you may be new to Applerouth, and our foundational belief is if you help students change their beliefs about what's possible for them, you can change their outcomes academically and change their lives. So that's our work, working with kids, helping them, change their belief in their limitations and their abilities. And the three things we do academic tutoring. We help kids with math and chemistry, physics. We do test preparation, and tonight's talk is squarely in that field. We also teach kids how to work better with their systems, with their resources, how to manage themselves better, which is executive functioning coaching. So we do all three things. Those are our three pillars, but tonight it's all test prep. All right, our agenda for the evening. First, what is up with this digital SAT? Talk about it, give us the background details. 2, some strategies in terms of different question types. 3, timelines, and think about it's coming up. October isn't that far away for the PSAT, and then March for the full crossover to digital. We'll talk about the PSAT, what's up with that, and then finally, we'll do a quick hit on test optional, because that is the world we live in. I think it's appropriate. All right, our timeline in terms of where things are. March was the official transition for all kids in the globe who are not in the US, are taking a computer-based digital adaptive SAT that happened in March. There was a March test and a May test and a June test. We have outcomes back for all 3 of those administrations, and it's going very well. So it looks like they're going to hit this thing, and they're not going to delay it. Things look like everything is, all systems go. October, we're going to have the official PSAT for the grades 8, 9, and 11. It's going to be on a computer. PSATs will have score return by Thanksgiving. And then December, that is the end of paper in the US and across the world, except for students who have an accommodation for a disability, which we're still learning, who's going to get the accommodation. But if you have it, do you still want to use it? Because a lot of kids, I think, are going to do prefer the digital test to the paper-based test for a lot of reasons. So March, this coming March, paper is out. All right. Adaptive testing is the foundation of the digital SAT. And it's section adaptive. You have tests like the GMAT, where every item changes. If I get this one wrong, the item changes. I get it right, the item changes afterwards. So it keeps shifting. This is section adaptive. So you have a standalone, straight, unmoving, unchanging section. At the end of that time, they figure your score, and they send you either to an easier or a harder adaptive section, as we know. There may be more iteration. There may be easy, medium, or harder eventually, but right now, what they've shown us is there are 2 possible outcomes after your baseline test. We'll talk more about that in detail, but that's the foundation of the digital adaptive test. All right, it's administered using the Blue Book app, which is available right now for download. If you're curious, you type in the word SAT Blue Book app and you download the software. It's going to be on your laptop or on your desktop or wherever you're taking this from. And most, you're going to be using the exact same application for preparation as you are to do the official test in the school day. and also on Saturdays and so forth. So that's really a big deal. The app locks out everything, so you can't go on the web, you can't do anything else. It is locking down your system, and you're going to enter a code when you get into the testing administration, which is going to unlock the test. So you'll download the test a couple days early, like on a Thursday. You go on there Saturday, they give you the code, and the encryption is open, and you can take, and then it's right there for you. But that's how they're going to administer it. Most of you will take it on your own device, whether it's going to be your Mac or your tablet, or your IBM clone, whatever it is. All right. Then we're talking about why digital testing, and there are definitely some major advantages. Digital testing is the future and the present, and honestly the past for many tests of assessments. For over 25 years, we've had digital and adaptive tests for the GRE and the GMAT, and now for the LSAT and the MCAT. Everything is computer-based. So the SAT is finally crossing over. Part of that was, they learned over the pandemic that they could administer a test to, millions of people at one time. That was a big learning for them. And now they're ready to pull the trigger and just do it. One of the best things about digital testing, it's much more secure. It's much harder to cheat because everyone's going to be getting, a slightly different test with different items and different orders and different answer choices. So my answer for number 13 is going to be B. Yours is going to be C. And so telling a friend, here are the answers, is not going to be helpful anymore. So security is massively improved versus a fixed form paper test. Scantrons go away. That's an old technology from the 1930s. It's about time for that. And that's going to be a good thing. No more misgridding or getting off when you're bubbling. Additionally, it's a much shorter test, and that's going to make it much more likely to administer these things during the school day. It's going to be only 2 hours and 24 minutes, not a total time of closer to 3.5, 4 hours. That's a big deal. Accommodations are also much easier to administer for kids. And you enter the code, if you have a disabilities code, and the machine administers the accommodation versus the proctor. And so time and a half, double time, extra breaks, all these things, changing the font size, it's all going to be there on your PC. Results come faster, and it's just a more efficient way to administer tests. So, all right. I think, Matt, do I hand this one over to you at this point?
We can do that for sure.
Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah.
All right, yeah. So some of these changes are that it's a shorter test period. I think it's going to be something that a lot of schools are going to prefer to administer it in during a school day, because at 2 hours and 24 minutes you can do it before lunch and not have to disrupt the whole day on there. And so I think that for a lot of rising juniors, you may take the SAT because that's what you're doing this Wednesday. It'd be also you're gonna have it where you have more time to answer questions. That the fewer students are gonna have problems with pacing on speed. That they've definitely given you more more time to process information. So reading and writing are now combined. There's no longer any subscores for that, and they're testing fewer grammatical concepts. They threw out a lot of stuff about redundancy and kind of idiomatic stuff. And the reading passages are shorter. They're just a paragraph, and sometimes we on there. But with a wider range of topics, so they can see poetry, you can see students can have that graph calculator Desmos. So we'll talk more about that in some slides down the way.
Okay, and one thing, Matt, just you were getting a little robotic there for a second in terms of your connection. So potentially, maybe, I don't know, if you want to log in, log out, just to see if that fixes that. I don't know. Okay, so in terms of the other changes, we mentioned the tests during the school day are going to be much more prominent. Already, we've seen a shift from 36% of tests were taken during a school day 5 years ago. Last year, it was 63%. We've heard this year it's actually closer to 68%. So what the College Board wants is for the SAT to live in your school during the school day, and that is what this test is going to allow. There is going to be a PSAT for 10th graders, but for some strange reason, the PSAT is going to remain paper for the sophomores in October, and then in the spring, it's going to be available in digital. And then after this, it's all digital. So I don't fully understand why that is, but it's going to be PSATs 11, 9, 8 are going to be digital adaptive this year. And then the sophomore PSAT is going to be digital in the spring. So that's just some strange anomaly there. And we mentioned school returns going to happen fast. So that is a very nice thing. You get your scores back within 10 days, and eventually it'll be within a few days once they get things ironed out and so forth. Okay. Things that are staying the same, the test content, the material. So those of you who have been prepping for the SAT, it's a lot of the similar, reading concepts, a lot of the similar math concepts, similar grammar ideas. The math is changing very little, except for we are seeing a vast decrease in the number of word problems, really diminishing the reading burden. There's much less reading on this SAT, which is great in terms of the math section. Scoring is not changing. If you got a 730 before, it means the exact same thing on the digital as on the paper. No change at all. A 550 is a 550. There's no conversion table. They did the pilot test, and the pilot was really smart. They had like 5,500 kids or so, and they gave them all a paper-based SAT, and then 2 weeks later they gave them a digital SAT, and it was like 10 points off. I mean, things were so 750 to 740. It was so close. So they're saying, we're not going to convert these things. They actually have calibrated it. That was the beauty of the pilot. So it's really, there's no score conversions, which is great for college admissions officers. There's no more interpreting what does that number mean. A 750 means 750, same thing. So that's a big deal. All right, Matt, let me hand this over.
Yeah, hopefully I'm being less glitchy now.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's talk about some of the format and structure and question types, and kind of get into some of the nitty gritty on for the SAT. So there are the two sections of reading. So reading and writing is one section, then there's math, and they're each broken into 2 modules. The first module and then the adaptive module, which might be easier or harder depending on how you did on the first on there. And then there are 4 modules total for the test. There's going to be some unmarked pre-test questions and they're experimental, but you're not going to be able to know which questions those are. So there's really no reason to kind of worry about that.
Okay.
There'll be a 10-minute break. Still bad again?
Yeah. You're a little bit glitchy tonight. I don't know what's going with the I mean, if you want, Matt, I could take this one and tap in for the Q&A. Would that be all right?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So Matt will be here. Matt can answer questions, but yeah, we're having some internet stuff. So the timing of the digital test, it is again 2 hours and 24 minutes. That's it. That is a much shorter test. That is wham bam. Yeah, you're done, and it's great. But also on top of that is they're giving you more time per question. That's a huge deal. So you have a shorter test, fewer items, and more time per question, which is one of the reasons why kids, when asked, do you like this test more? The majority of kids said, yes, this is a better test. This is a superior assessment. I liked it, and I prefer it to paper. Here's an example of the digital SAT, the verbal. You have 71 seconds per question, on that, versus the ACT verbal, 44 seconds a question. Similar for math. You have 95 seconds per question for the digital SAT math versus a minute. So you have an extra 60% more time per question on the digital SAT versus the ACT. That's a huge deal. That's like getting an accommodation for extra time without needing an accommodation. So that's one of the reasons when people said this thing felt much less rushed, less of a hurry. That's a big deal. And the part of it, they cut the number of questions down in pre-testing because they realized there were still a few kids who were rushing. So they lopped off a couple questions of each section, and then fewer kids had to rush. So this was very thoughtful to have fewer items and still, to make the test feel better and less paced. Now, the number of test items, this is actually pretty tremendous. Look at the digital SAT. So when it comes to the verbal section, you have time is an hour 4 minutes. You have 54 questions. That's the green. Compared to the current paper-based SAT is 96. Compared to the ACT is 115 questions. So to arrive at the exact same answer of your verbal score, reading in English, the digital adaptive SAT can get you the answer in 54 questions. The ACT needs 115 questions. Think about that for that. That's one of the reasons why kids are going to like this test, because part of it When it comes to classical testing theory, I have to ask a huge number of questions, a lot of easy ones, a lot of middle ones, a lot of hard ones, even though you may be a really, really strong student, and all of those those very easy questions are being wasted on you. And in a similar fashion, a student's not scoring very well, asking them a bunch of hard questions, those are wasted on them. So when you have digital adaptive, you eliminate many questions that aren't relevant to the student at hand. That's why we can go from 115 questions down to 54. That's why this is, I believe, a better test writ large. So we mentioned, Matt said that, we have these experimental items that are embedded in there. They're going to be 2 of them per section, but you're never going to know which ones, so it's not really worth worrying about. And they're going to be able to pre-test a lot of items across the country, because different kids have different tests, so to make sure they're building their future tests at all times. So, and there's a question: does each question weigh more? Yeah, it does. When you go from 100 questions down to 50, there's less room for error. So a careless error would be more expensive. That's one of the costs. So you have more time per question, you have fewer questions, but if you're making a bunch of careless errors, they're the higher penalty. That's how that works. So adaptive. Let's do a deeper dive now into what this actually means. And we talked about it's section adaptive, and let me show you visually what that looks like. So, and also in terms of the scoring, there's something called item response scoring, which is new. This is a fairly radical departure from the last 90 plus years of the College Board. Forever and ever and ever, one raw point was one raw point. Didn't matter if I got a hard one right or wrong, an easy or middle one, it all was scaled up the same. That's changing. All items don't count the same. But you're never going to know. You're not going to know those. And they're going to, as we understand it, they're going to have possibly up to 1 to 5 different ratings. So this question, and what they've done is they have done a lot of pre-testing of items. So they ask kids 40 questions. They realize, question number 35, if you get that one right, you have a 90% plus chance of getting right number 36, 37, 38. So rather than ask you those 4 questions, they're going to assign higher weighting question 35, and that's going to be weighted higher, and that's how they can go from 115 down to 54. Is they can eliminate items by increasing the weight on certain items. So again, you're not going to ever know which ones count more or less, but that's part of the efficiency of the test. Okay, all right. So, and I see some questions coming in. I think I'm going to save some of these to make sure we can just I'll get to all of them, I promise. But let me go through the deck, and then we'll get to all the questions. Here's how the scoring works. I will answer some of these questions, as well with these slides. So the baseline math section, you have 20 items that are operational, 2 experimental. If I get about 2/3 right, when I finish that baseline module, they're going to route me to the harder module, which will be harder problems on average. If I get fewer than 2/3 right, I'm going to be routed to the easier module. And you can see the scores are capped. So if I get routed to the easy module, that means I've missed about 1/3 of the items in the first one. I'm not going to get more than a 650 or a 660 on the test, because I've already missed 7 questions, which isn't that different than the current SAT. If I miss 7 questions here, I'm going to be in the 600s. I'm not getting 700 or above. So that's not really a big change, honestly. But if I get routed to the harder section, my minimum score is going to be a 460, because I've already answered 2/3 right in the first section. Even if I miss every question, I'm getting credit for those. So that's the scoring band, the scoring ranges. Now, here's the interesting thing. So if I get between a 460 and a 650, I don't know if I was routed to the easier or harder module. They never tell you. There's no indication on your score report. You have no idea. If I get a 700 or above, I went to the hard module. If I get a 350 or below 460, I went to the easier module. But if you're in that middle scoring range, those 200 points roughly, you don't know which way you went. So trying to figure out, am I in the hard one, the easier one? You just can't tell until your score comes back. All right. Now, I mentioned the item response scoring is different, and also when you get routed to different easier or harder module, it changes the scoring a little bit. So look at the blue line. That's a student this is on the verbal section. This student on module 1 got 18 right, didn't do as well, was routed to the easier module. Then the student crushed the module 2, the adaptive module, at 25 right. Total correct on the student, 43 right, scaled score 560. And look at the top line, compare that to this student who on the first module crushed it, 25 right on the verbal. But then the second module, the adaptive, went to the harder module, missed, like did worse than chance, got 7 right. So total correct 32, but the scaled score on this kid has a 580. So just take a minute. So 43 right, 560, 32 right, 580. So that's something in how scoring changes here on this test. So the days of old of one question, 1 point, that goes away. Just be mindful of that. That's kind of, again, how they get you to this more efficient test. So we talked about the upper limit, the lower limits for scoring. It'll vary some by test, but that's what we've seen so far on the first 4 tests that are on the Blue Book app. And it's important you understand that the modules, the adaptive modules are going to look really different. And, for the trained student, they're going to feel a little bit different too, in terms of the number of easy questions, medium and hard questions. And so knowing that though, it's not worth wondering, am I on the harder adaptive or the easier, adaptive? Is it experimental? Does this one weigh more or less? These things are not helpful for your final score. And we're advising our students who are prepping, our international kids, like take it one item at a time, give every item your absolute best and move forward. Don't start working on the test, stay in the test. Don't get meta on us, like, am I in the hard module? Those thoughts aren't helpful. They're distracting, actually. So let me show you how this plays out. This is the baseline module, okay? And so you look at the number of the level 1 questions, which are pretty easy. There are 2 of them, okay? The level 2 questions, still easy, but a little bit harder. There are 10 of them. Then you have the little bit, harder middle questions. You have 7 of those level 3 questions, and you have 3 level 4 questions. So the baseline section has a mix, but you skew towards the middle, to figure out where you are. Now look at the next one. If you get under 2/3 right, they're shifting you toward an easier average module. You still have easy, medium, and hard questions, but look how it varies some. Now, level 1, I had 2, now I have 7 level 1 questions. I had 10 level 2, now I have 9. I had 7 level 3, now I have 5, and I have 3 level 4, now I have 1. So I'm skewing easier. If, however, I get 2/3 right on that baseline blue module, they're going to shift my adaptive into the hard one. Look at this one. It looks very different. So I had 7 level 1 questions for the easy one. Now I have 1. So there's, again, skipping all of that. That's how we get things more efficient. Level 2 questions, I had 9. Now I have 4. But level 3 is where they blow it up. I had 5 questions in the easy module. Now I have 12. And then the level 4, the really hard stuff, I had 1 question. Now I have 5. So this, just pause for a moment, look at that. This is how it's section adaptive, and this is how we gain efficiencies. And this is the structure of this test. If you get the slide, you kind of get adaptive, section-based adaptive testing. Okay. All right, now, Matt, are you still? Matt was going to handle this. He's actually like writing our curriculum on the content. But let me see. But all right, well, you know what? I can cover the slides. So when it comes to the reading questions, there are definitely some meaningful changes. The reading and writing sections, they were changed the most. We have questions in certain categories that are going to be calling for different strategies. They also threw back in some sentence completions, but we're not having to learn vocabulary words. It's more like basic, where a basic word has 2 meanings, and I have to read the context. You're not going to ever be memorizing words again for this SAT. That's a thing in the past. Here's an example of the words in context. Frustrated with the blank of current terms, the author coined the term to describe the genre of science fiction that's written. All right. So then the question is, word context, which choice completes the text logically? Frustrated with the variety of terms, the limitation of terms, the precision, the obscurity, and then you can eliminate immediately variety and obscurity. Then you can figure out, is it the limitations of current terms or the precision? It's probably going to be the limitations. And so I think that's kind of basic. Now here's evidence-based questions. There's definitely a focus on evidence. There has been since 2016. And they're going to give you a little poem, a paragraph. The Spring is a poem by Thomas Carew. In the poem, the speaker compares the changes in the season to the adjectives beloved. And then which quotation makes that claim, gives evidence to that claim. And you're going through these different lines from the poem and choosing which one of these makes the most sense with, comparing a season to the beloved. So looking for the kind of the season. So it's giving you a sense of the things. Inference questions are, again, they're trying to figure out, they have the science-based question. Polyurethanes are commonplace. However, they're hard to recycle. They've been trying to, do a bio-based one using lignin, yada, yada, yada. As their research goes on, they'll need to determine whether the bio-based foams blank, and you just fill it in. So again, this is it. That's the paragraph, and that's the entire thing. On the old SAT, they would give you 90 lines of text. Now they're giving you, like 10. So this is it. And then after this, they're giving you a brand new section. So this is the question. Here's the passage. Here's the question. Bam. Now we shift over to history. Bing, boom, bam. Now we do a grammar question. Little thing, bam. Now we do it. So it's like, it's really quick. You're not ever getting into these big, long passages. Now someone said it's like TikTok, where you have to be nimble cognitively. So they keep shifting from grammar to reading, and it's from science to history to poetry. Rhetorical synthesis. This is actually a new question type. I think these are kind of fun. These come at the end, where they're going to give you a series of bullets. They're not going to actually give you a paragraph with sentences. A student took the notes. Volcanic eruptions are major or minor. They can cool temperatures. Temperatures keep rising. The scientists are studying how they distribute particles. Aubrey and Schmidt are analyzing models to see if it's offsetting global warming. And then the students, then you answer a question: which choice effectively uses the information to accomplish this goal? And then you're synthesizing. So here's the data points. What is the result if I were trying to make a single sentence to describe what I learned there? Basic stuff, and it's not big of a departure or change. Math, you have a reduction in problems. Again, the same thing on verbal. You're down to 44 problems. So again, to the person's question, will carelessness count more? Yeah, when you have fewer items, you have to be a little more careful, but you have more time to be more careful as part of it too. And also, 2016, when they introduced the redesigned SAT, there was a lot more reading. It was really a Common Core based. It was about math fluency. How can I read text and extract the math? And there was a lot of word problems. They are getting rid of a lot of word problems. So we're only going to have 30% of the math items are going to be word problems. The rest of them are just pure math. And that's a very vast departure. And they're also getting rid of idioms and anything like the reading heavy content. So the next piece that's a big deal is embedded in the SAT and PSAT. You have a Desmos calculator. Desmos, some of you may know it from high school in physics or chemistry classes. Desmos is a powerful graphing calculator that's going to just be there, and you can open it and close it with a mouse click. And on the current SAT, you have one section with calculator, one without. They were trying to get at mental math and calculations. Now the assumption is you always have your phone. Do I need to really be able to do long division? And they're saying no. And you can answer, the majority of questions using Desmos. You plug things in. You can graph. There's a lot of algebra, a lot of plotting points, and the intersection between algebraic equations and quad formula, and looking at the intersection of the graph and find the answers, and so forth. So you have to work to make sure you're cozy with Desmos. And you can also bring your own calculator. Some kids, they tend to do like finding mean or median on their own TI, but then they use graphing for the Desmos because it really is an excellent graphic calculator. And if you're going to get ready for this test, you must practice with the Desmos. It definitely makes things easier, but you have to make sure you know how to use it. And that's worth a little bit of your time. The math content isn't changing all that much. Algebra is popping up a tiny bit, advanced math up a little bit. We are seeing a decrease in problem solving and data analysis, and we're seeing fewer percentages, less probability, less and fewer stats. And they're adding in a little bit of geometry and trig back, which was reduced in 2016. So again, small tweaks. You probably won't notice it too much, but most of the content is very similar. And part of it is that every student is going to have a slightly different test. They say it's going to be highly comparable but unique, and that can play out in different ways. Right now, we're seeing changes in orders. So my number 15 is your number 7, but also on that same question, my answer is B and your answer is C. So we're seeing some shifting of the order. We're seeing shifting of the answer choices. eventually we may see actually changes in content. So if they're giving me a level 3 algebra problem, they may be picking from 10. So I'm getting this one, you're getting another one, and the person next to you is getting a different one. So we're all doing it level 3 algebra, but using different problems. Or they could even template the problem. So for me, I'm looking at a 3, 4, 5 triangle, and you're looking at, times 3, 9, 12, 15, or whatever it is. Or there's some other triangle that's templated, but then the numbers change, or they give you a similar a grammar question, but the sentence changes slightly. So even though it's the same concept, the same, I'm testing commas or possession, they're going to have me do it with a different sentence, but going after the same like level 2 grammar question. All right, now the tools on the Blue Book app, they have a series of built-in tools. You have a timer that you can toggle it and turn it on, turn it off. At 5, it blinks at 5 minutes. The reference sheet is always there, which is actually very helpful. Before I turn back a few pages, I can open it and close it with a click, which is great. I can annotate if I want to, though you're having these really short passages. So we're finding that we have fewer students doing the annotation. It's digital. I can highlight text. I can type things in, but you're just going so quickly. Typically, most kids aren't doing that because there's less of a working memory burden trying to remember where you are in a very short passage. What kids are using from our feedback, they're definitely using the answer eliminator. I can cross off A digitally, cross off B. Also, there's answer masking. I can hide the answers, if I want to answer to myself first. But definitely the eliminator is very popular. And then there's also a magnifier. I can open things up, expand. I can make it the font smaller or bigger if I choose. And this is a very much used function. It's the very, very bottom. There's something called mark for review. I click on the bottom, this thing opens up, and I can see exactly where I am in the test. I can see, did I skip number 4? Did I answer number 4? And then you can flag. If you know what, I wasn't sure about 6, I'm going to flag 6. And then at the very end of the test, to get like 2 minutes left, I can bounce from my flag ones from 6 to 15 to 26 and answer them all quickly if I need to. Very helpful. No more going back and forth, and you never again get off grid. And if you don't answer, if you leave one blank, it's very obvious. I didn't answer 4. That is super duper helpful. All right, how do I prep? Well, learning about Desmos is important. Taking practice tests is important. These are all the pieces. Accommodations are going to be administered digitally. And so kids who have extra breaks, kids who have extra timing, the computer, you put a code in on the morning of the test and the computer does it all for you. You also have like text to speech. You have to bring your own earpiece if you have a hard time reading the text. It'll speak it for you for some of our kids with dyslexia or visual processing issues. And it used to be, some kids would want an accommodation to have a calculator always. Now it's just baked in for every section for the math. Some kids needed bigger text. Now I can just do the computer. So it's really cool. And kids with dyslexia, some of them brought like screens to put on top. I can change the color. So accommodations get easier and smarter on the computer. And there's language. If a student cannot take it digitally, they contact customer service and to request a paper-based test. There is going to be a paper test for those who want it. It's half an hour longer. Here are the structures. The digital SAT, again, is 2 hours and 14 minutes. The paper-based accommodations test is 2 hours and 44 minutes. So yeah, a little bit longer reading, a little bit longer math, and every item counts. There's no experimental items which wouldn't affect you, but what would affect you is the half an hour difference. All right, the international rollout, we've already seen 3 official SATs, 100,000 plus kids, March, May, and June. We've been prepping many of those kids, in terms of our kids in England, kids in China, kids in different countries, and the tests were administered and the issues were so minimal. A few kids, most of our students had no issues. Everything was smooth as silk. A couple kids said, you know what, there were a little bit of I needed a little help with the downloading code. I raised my hand, they came and fixed it. At the very, very end, and here's how it works. You only need Wi-Fi literally for like 2 seconds because you're going to download your test at home. It's going to be encrypted on your device, on your laptop, on your tablet. You walk in the test day, they're going to give you the code, you enter it, the encryption's open, so now you can actually use it. And then, so you need Wi-Fi for a second on the front end of the test. Then you go in and you're taking the test. If the power goes down, It's all being saved and timestamped on your device. So unless your device bursts into flames, even if it powers down, it's all saved there with like how many, it happened to a couple of kids, I think froze, their computer froze, they powered down, they turned it back on again. It was right there before. You have 7 minutes and 10 seconds left, or number 33 and go, or number 25, whatever it was. And then at the very, very end, when you're finished, you have to upload your scores to the cloud. And that is a text file. It's a tiny, I don't know how many kilobytes, but all you do, you log in, send your scores, and then that's it. So you need Wi-Fi for a second on the front, second on the end, and not at all during the middle. So the Wi-Fi could be no Wi-Fi in the school, it'll go down, no problem. They're going to remind you 10 times to charge your device. But if you have a charging issue, there's going to be a separate room for tech issues. And the College Board's funding someone to be there to help with tech support, to make sure that there is a Wi-Fi network and to make sure there's power. Kids getting extra time are going to have like power cords available. And one of the cool things, like you'll need Wi-Fi in the room for this, but the proctors have a tablet which is scanning everybody in their room and showing you exactly where they are in terms of their progress. They have something called the Test Day Toolkit app. So if a student is frozen, they can see on their tablet, oh, wow, Jennifer hasn't pressed a button in 2 minutes. She can go over, and before they even raise their hand, they can see there's something going on, but there's been no progress. So they actually can track it digitally, which is pretty cool as well. And they can help with that. The feedback so far we've learned is watch your pacing on the adaptive section. That, because again, if you go from the baseline module with a mix of easy, medium, and hard, and then you're routed to the more advanced module, your pacing has to adjust because you're not going to be getting all the easy problems. You're going to have a harder sample of problems, which means you can't just be dallying. So just be mindful of your pacing. And the feedback has been, you have to know Desmos. If you don't know Desmos, take some time and practice. Make sure you're familiar. Some of you, it'll be very, very easy, very familiar. Some of you, it's intuitive. Other kids, make sure you know how to use all the different pieces of Desmos. That's important. That it's a scaled down version that they're giving you, but still it's a very powerful tool. The scores, most of the scores came back within 10 days. And they promise they're going to bring it down to a few days eventually. They'll probably never give it to you real time because, for a lot of reasons. But they're going to bring that down quite a bit. And score reports arrive. Now, here's something I want to show you. So you'll be ready. The score reports have minimal detail that we've seen so far from the international testing. Here is a copy of a score report. Forever in a day, we've always been able to look at a score report and we'd analyze, okay, you missed number 13. You're in a time, you guessed randomly in the last 3, you got them wrong. You can't see that anymore. They're not showing you what you missed. They're just showing you as an example, like for reading and writing. This student got a 730 on reading and writing. And they give you these blocks of, these like how many black lines are filled in. So expression of ideas, there are 8 to 12 questions, 8 or 12, I have no idea. The student got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of 7 bars right. Does that mean this student missed 2 questions or 1 question or missed 1 very highly weighted question on the hard section? I have no idea. And the same thing, so the 750, the score did get higher, but missed 5 bars. So I just don't know what to do with that. That's one of the reasons why Applerouth, we have our own score reports, which have very rich, robust feedback, which we're going to be using to help prep our kids. And we already are using them to prep our kids. So that's more rich for information for us. All right, now when it comes to the comparison, paper versus digital, the pilot study, the first one they did with 5,500 kids, 8 of 10 kids said, I like the computer better. And they took it within 2 weeks of each other. So there was no memory issues or distortion. It was just like, take the paper, then the digital, like, oh, wow. The digital one is actually superior in terms of timing, pacing. It wasn't rushed. I liked it a lot better. Administrators liked it as well. There's no gathering paper. There's no matching your test booklet with your answer sheet. There's no more of the code. It's all kids sit down, to give them, here are the codes, they take it, they finish, they walk out. And, so that's different. It shows, again, shorter test, shorter passages, more time per question, always have a calculator and faster results. These are the reasons why I think we believe kids like the new test more. All right, the timelines. There are potentially 4 different timelines. Matt, do you want to give it a crack?
I did a full restart, so hopefully I'm better now.
Give it a crack, my man. Take
All
it
right. I thank you, Jed, for covering a lot of my work tonight.
No problem.
Yeah, so for this is going to be for students that are going to be rising juniors, and it says current sophomores. That's because we did this in back in May. We need to update that slide.
We'll update that.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so there are some different paths that a rising junior can take. One is that you can stick with the paper test. There's nothing wrong with the paper test. We have a lot of resources for that, and it is it's something that we know. And so, but you have to finish that paper test by December in there, because once that December test happens, it's going to be digital all the way. So this is going to work best for students who've already taken Algebra 2, because like that's basically where the Algebra 2 is where the level of math that the SAT tests, and it doesn't really go into much pre-calculus or anything additional. There's hybrid. It's okay to switch. The scores are the same. So you could have you could take a paper test and then convert to the digital test in the spring. Here the scores are on the same scale. It's unknown whether schools will super score paper or digital. That's a choice that the school has to make. So this I think is a try the best of both worlds on there. You can go all digital. So in that one, you want to really make sure to pay attention to the PSAT, because that is going to be your first exposure to like a real day testing. And it's also good for students who are taking Algebra 2 or play football or something where fall is going to be a difficult time to study and stuff. So there's nothing wrong with that. And then there's a fourth option. ACT is still here. The ACT is not planning any big change. The one thing to note is ACT does have a lot more math concepts. It goes all the way up to pre-calculus, and does have that science section that the tests on your ability to deduce scientific information. And so we got a little chart here, and you see like the orange is paper testing, and then the blue there is digital, and you kind of see the timelines of those. These are obviously the first three plans, because the ACT is just going to be its thing. So and so I think we've they like it. I mean, I think with the slide we basically said before,
Yeah,
but
okay.
Yeah, we can. Let's start with PSAT. So the PSAT is going to be this digital test in the fall, and some of the changes are going to be is that it is structurally the same as the digital SAT. It's the same number of questions, same structure on there. There's the only kind of the changes is that it does leave out a couple of math items. It doesn't test on circles. It doesn't test on advanced factoring. And from the one example we've seen so far, it seems that the vocab is a little bit lighter. The schools are going to have flexible scheduling on that, so they can schedule between October 2nd or to October 31st. So before, most schools gave it on like whatever the middle Wednesday was, or whatever on the 15th. That is not going to be the case this year. And schools can also stagger where they can have different grades, or have last names A through K take it first, and then L through Z or something like that. The score is going to be on this 160 760 per section scale, and that's what it has been. The idea is that because the PSAT is a little bit easier, that it is like you can't get an 800. And the idea is that the concordance would be if you took that same performance, you would get a 760 on the SAT, not like an 800. Scores go back real fast. They're going to come out in some batches, but they said by mid November, so that'll be before Thanksgiving. And previously it had been in early December, and there is now a practice test. It was released last week on the Blue Book app. And we also know some more things about National Merit. So National Merit is to get into their scholarship. For juniors, that is the PSAT is the way through. And they had done a thing where back when the test was 2,400, it was reading, math, and writing, and so they've kind of kept with that. So they've just released the index there. It's a little crazy. So the reading and writing section, that one score is doubled, and then you add in the math, and then they divide by 10, so that's no longer it was a 228, I think is the is the maximum score. And so it does match up with the scores you see from prior years, so that you can say that, oh yeah, the state averages a 220 cutoff they can still say that. But what we're noticing is it because there isn't a writing section and there's far fewer writing concepts, they're really emphasizing the ELA. So I mean, for a student who's English language learner, like this is be a much harder scholarship to qualify for, or students that are strong in math and STEM. This is there's a disadvantage in there. And so for those students that are highly motivated to get the national merit, knowing that getting familiar with that reading and writing section, and that's where most of your study should be, honestly, on there, because it is 2/3 of your score. That was a little bit of a surprise. And will they super score between digital and paper? Maybe, I don't know. That's, I think that's something a few many months down the line. They have to see. I think schools are going to wait and see on this one. So I wouldn't do it. And the ACT is starting to play with some computer-based testing and offering some pilot programs. If any of you here in Atlanta, there are some schools around the periphery of Atlanta, outside the perimeter mostly, that are offering it, but not like widespread. And so if you are planning on taking the ACT and in Atlanta, you can definitely still take a paper test. There's plenty of testing options in there. Do you want to switch over to test optional?
Yeah, I can rock and roll for a few minutes. Then we'll go to the Q&A. We already have 11 questions lined up, so we'll make sure there's room for that. So the world as we know it, it's a test optional world for the majority of schools, except for the flagships in a few places, and MIT and Georgetown, Purdue. But honestly, there are 80+% of schools that are optional now. So that means your application is complete without test scores. However, test scores can still be a factor because, again, they're optional, but many things that have an impact are optional. Submitting your AP scores, rigorous classes, strong grades, all these things. So there can be a very meaningful impact of having a strong test score. And why they matter: a lot of kids have really a lot of strong grades. Grades are not as robust of a predictor of four-year grades and graduation in college as they used to be, and testing still contributes something independent of your grades. So we see there is an advantage for certain students applying to certain colleges. At UVA, it looks like it's about a 90% pop. Like kids are getting in at a much higher rate with test scores than without test scores. Same thing like Boston College, you have 29% of kids getting in with test scores versus 11% without. That's an extreme outlier, but we're seeing that similar numbers. Colgate, and then but certain schools like Vandy, it's a much smaller pop. 7% with scores, 6 without. But certain schools seem to really privilege the test scores. And all of that difference isn't totally tied to having a test score, because part of it is kids sending test scores are sending stronger test scores, and kids with strong test scores also tend to have good grades and good academic rigor. So there's part of that. But also, we've heard from college admissions officers, if I have 2 kids applying to the exact same high school, similar course taking, both have 3.7, 3.8, one kid sends me a 34, one kid has no testing. Well, the 34 is part of the equation. And so that's where it's not just correlation, but the number itself does have some causal weight. I mentioned like the Florida publics, they never stopped it requiring testing. Tennessee, every school in that system requires testing. The Georgia flagships do, UGA and Tech. And then also I mentioned MIT and Georgetown and Purdue, and then a few others. There's also conditional test optional like Auburn. If I have a 3.6 or above, test optional. 3.59 or below, it's test required. Okay. 1 second, Peter, on the poll, we're almost there. And then, and test scores can also affect merit-based aid. I always throw this slide out for Alabama. Given a 3.5 GPA, as my test scores increase, they keep giving me more money. My niece got a 1390 SAT, which put her in the UA Scholar range, which means her tuition, she lives in Virginia, went from $30,000 a year down to $6,000 a year. So they offered her $96,000 for her test score. That was a big deal. So that's Merit Scholar. So Applerouth would definitely, Matt?
Oh, say our coworker Tom Burt, his oldest son has just got the same thing on UGA for Alabama.
That is sick. So again, these things can help pay for school, and it's real. And so we've been working for years on digital tests, and we actually have our digital practice test, which we can administer to you. You can practice it. We have rich, robust feedback, and so forth. And we have more test forums. We're working on another test for later on this summer. All right. So again, we do 3 things. And Peter, go ahead and launch the poll. This will take you about 30 seconds. Just 4 quick questions. Who are you? Are you a student, parent, educator? If so, where are you in the process? Junior, senior, sophomore, freshman? Any areas that we do that might benefit you? And then finally, would you want someone to reach out about testing or any other things that we do? And that's it. Super fast. Those are our questions. And now it's time to answer your questions. So let me open up and we'll answer all of them. Here we go. So I guess Matt will kind of go back and forth. The first one is the digital SAT keeping the question and answer service? And the answer is no. Question and answer service goes away forever. They're not going to give us answer choices back. They're not going to give us any test return back. They promised us they're going to give us more practice, but not your test. Matt, you have.
Yeah, they are going to plan to eventually retire questions and put them in a question bank. And so that, like, that's it won't be your necessarily questions that you saw, but it's ones that they're official ones that will place as practice. But yeah, as someone who's enjoyed analyzing those.
Yeah, so they'll be retiring questions, but your pattern of answering right or wrong in a test, that we don't get that anymore, unless you do a practice test with Applerouth or some other company where I can actually see a detailed version of how you did and where you made mistakes. All right, the first time anyone in the US can take the digital version is in March 2024. Well, but for the pilots, there are pilots. Matt, any other feedback on that?
Yeah, I mean, there have been people that took the pilots. That was like about a year ago. I mean, you can go to another country and take it. I mean, you have that option if you want to, fly to Canada and take it. But
it's coming to everybody. So December paper ends, and March everyone's taking the digital adaptive SAT. All right, have you started offering the mock test for practice? Yes, yeah. We did, and you could take it tomorrow, and we'll give you a full school report with detail. And we're making a second test this summer, so we'll have 2. We want to make, eventually we'll have 4. We're going to keep working, iterating, so our students will have ample practice. There are only 4 practice tests on the College Board website. How to get more? Well, the Blue Book app has the 4, and there are 4 like linear tests, but there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, you can't do both. It's not 8 tests for sure. Yeah,
they're not 8 tests. There are definitely some more practice items in terms of if you type in College Board linear practice SAT, it'll show up. But you have to work with other companies who are either making these things, administering them. So the College Board they give you 4, the Blue Book. Applerouth, we're going to have 2 within pretty short amount of time. And then you may have to go, Barron's or other companies, McGraw-Hill, who are developing these.
Yeah, and there's now a PSAT mock test on Blue Book, and it's a full length, with no overlap with the other tests. So there's actually
slightly easier.
It's slightly easier, but if you're looking for practice, I mean, I wouldn't turn away from it.
Perfect. So we have essentially 5 practice tests from the Blue Book app, a couple from Applerouth, and then other ones beyond that. All right. Even though the test itself is digital, will there be a physical scrap paper available? Yes. 3 pieces of paper are coming to you, and if you need more, raise your hand. So you have a pencil, you have scratch paper. If you run out of scratch, they need more scratch. Could you please add some light to the answer eliminator and the answer mask again? Yeah. So this was actually like we queried students. One of my colleagues, like, what are the most used features? And one of the most popular features was the answer eliminator. And all it is, for time immemorial, for 20 plus years, Applerouth, we say, if you can go through, cross off, if A is obviously wrong, you physically cross off letter A, cross off C, squiggle next to C, so this eliminator is, I can go and it's a little thing over the answer choices. I tap it eliminator, and then so A gets a line through it. I can still read it. If I need to read it again, I can unline it, but it puts a line through that answer choice. So it helps you visually reduce the choices in front of you. And answer masking, for a long, long time, one of our rules of thumb at Applerouth is get your own answer first. And then, so don't be confused or distracted by the answer choices. Read the question and then generate your own answer, then compare your answer with the ABCD. So you don't get thrown off by their language. Once you have your own answer, so part of it, answer masking, is like just covering it with your hand. I press answer masking, so I read the question, but then I can't see the ABCD. So I can still answer it by myself and then try to compare and contrast and see which ones match my answer. All right, Matt, if we don't know how to use Desmos, do we have to learn how to use it, or can we just bring in our graphic calculator?
Yeah, you can definitely bring your own graphing calculator. You can also learn to use Desmos. So it's desmos.com. It's a free website. I've been using Desmos for many, many years, just teaching math. So go on desmos.com and play with it. And what you can do is you can graph equations, and you can see like where two equations intersect. That's the solution for it. So and there's very few differences between the online version, like the web version, and the Blue Book version. It's not really worth like having to log into Blue Book to use that version. It's like one or two features are turned off. It's no big deal. The core thing definitely works.
There's a question. Are colleges planning on increasing their SAT preferred score requirements? Well, it's interesting because a lot of it's already happened. When the pandemic hit and colleges went test optional, what happens when you do optional, there's research from my colleagues, Andrew Blasco studied the 200 plus schools or 180 schools. And they found that typically when you go test optional, your scores increase on average around 20, 30 points because you're eliminating the lower scoring kids who don't submit. You tend to be keeping the submitters who have higher scores. So our college is going to be raising the requirements while the freshmen incoming at the averages and the middle 50 percentile ranges have typically increased a little bit after schools go test optional. That's something that we did see that. But they're not going to be artificially raising, because again, the digital scores calibrate almost perfectly with the paper from the pilot. So the difference was under 10 points. It was like nothing. So kids, 5,000 of students, if I got a 1330 on the paper, I got a 1340 on digital. It was so close to being a rounding error. So there shouldn't be any changes based on going to a digital model. It's simply a different way of delivering similar material that's calibrated by scores. Our slides coming our way. We're going to send you a copy of the recording. And so you can kind of go back through the slides and watch the deck that way. How do we sign up for the practice test tomorrow?
Well, so to that question, you said you take it tomorrow. So it is actually a practice test on demand. You could conceivably take it tonight. But what's going to be the best way is you have to have an Applerouth account. It would be to, there's a number on there. You can reach out and say, hey, I'd like to get access to the practice test, or info@applerouth.com. There isn't a scheduled time because it's a fully digital test. So it's just a matter of, being logged in and getting access to the program.
Yeah. And that's interesting. Even during the testing administration, I've heard like some kids who started late, everyone's on their own time schedule. So it's like if some kid starts 5 minutes late, they're having an issue, they start, and again, they're on their own pace. And the break's 10-minute break, but you take your break, and even if they're staggered a bit, it's all okay because it's the computer dictates everything. So we're kind of remodeling that with you take it when you have time. There was a student here, Peter, maybe log this from Laura, needed some help with an EF coach. Can we find the candidate? My email is there. If you wouldn't mind copying that for tomorrow to share that with one of the program advisors. Appreciate that. And then would the PSAT digital be indicative of what a student would get on the digital ST? Yeah, Matt, want to fill that one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be the scale goes down to 760 on there, but I think it's and it is a little easier in some just like the level 5 questions, that there are fewer of them, but I think it's certainly close enough. And if you're the kind of student where like 760 versus 800 is the difference, I mean, good for you. You're doing great either way.
Yeah. So it's a good proxy, and that's part of the whole thing with the calibration, their linear, the nature of it. If on a given day, as Matt said, if I get a 660 on the PSAT, I should get the exact same score on the full scale SAT. But only that the 40-point difference at the top, that's the only difference by section. Otherwise, these are really calibrated. They're equated and so forth. All right. I think that is all the questions, and it's 9 o'clock on the nose.
Got it done.
Good timing. All right, everybody. If you have any other questions, if you want support for the digital SAT, anything EF coaching, academic coaching, give us a shout. We're here. And thanks for coming out tonight. Look for a recording later on this week. All right, y'all. Have a good night.